Would you please join with me in welcoming Marcus Ruiz Evans?
Hi, thank you all for letting me come on. I really appreciate being able to be here. I wrote a book called California's Next Century 2.0. This is the cover of the book. If you type in California's Next Century 2.0 or Marcus Ruiz Evans on Google, Bing, Yahoo, anywhere, first page is going to come up of results about the book, articles, and videos I've done. Or go to Amazon, where you can purchase the book in either print or electronic format. Does anybody have a smartphone? It plays on your smartphone. For those of you that do, and for everybody else who likes print, it would look like this. The wording has been expanded. It was a trick by the publisher to make it look larger than it actually is. And better for people who need glasses. So what is California's next century? I like to start off with what I call the big sales pitch. So I'm going to make some radical claims about the way that California could be in the future, and they're going to seem too good to be true. And you're right, they are right now. But if we do the shift, as I propose in the book, then everything I'm about to say can come to pass. So let's start off. Half of your taxes gone. Yes, half of the highest tax rate in the entire country removed. A third or half of the bureaucracy from Sacramento over the counties and cities removed. Public schools funded to where they are now, again, number one in the entire world, like they used to be in the Golden State era. Anybody remember the Golden State era? Yes, exactly. So I had to read about it. Now, in the Golden State era, we had the best roads, schools, dams, seaports, airports, levees, government buildings, universities. Anybody want to take a guess where all of our infrastructure, school, roads, dams, seaports, airports, levees, government buildings, is where California is rated today for our infrastructure in comparison to the entire rest of the country? 48 out of 50. Your schools, your roads, your dams, your seaports, your airports, your levees, your government buildings, basically everything it takes to run a modern nation or state, 48 out of 50, essentially worse than the entire country. Now let me ask you another question. Where does California stand in comparison to the other states on tax rate? Is it the highest in the country or the lowest in the country? Anybody want to take a guess? Yes, yes, California has the highest tax rate in the entire country. New York's right after us. And yet we have the lowest of all 50 states for schools, roads, dams, seaports, airports, levees, etc. Does that make sense to anybody? What I'm talking about is fixing that. Where California's tax rate is about middle with other states, and where our infrastructure is back like it was 30, 40 years ago when we were the envy of the entire world. Now, how can you have lower taxes and improved schools and public infrastructure? Tax everybody. Nope, there's a different way to do it. But hold on to that thought, because that's what a lot of people think. There's another option. And here's how we can do that. So, I got to take a little history lesson. And then I'm going to weave it back into why California, meeting the needs of the upcoming century, can actually have lower taxes and everything paid for without raising taxes. So here it goes. 1945, World War II ends. The world is now split between Western capitalism and democracy and communism, control over the economy, control over everyone's life. Around 1985, 1989, something happens. The Berlin Wall falls. Communism ends. And everybody realizes that democracy and some form of democracy and capitalism is the way to go. And a bunch of countries that were toying around with communism or not quite sure they wanted to become capitalist decide, you know what, we got to follow the American model. And so what happens is all of these countries that were formerly communist or not completely sure they wanted to become capitalists are now converting their economies to become capitalist. Their names are Brazil, Russia, India, China, a collection of Southeast Asian nations known as ASEAN, and they're going to become new superpowers. Their economies will become as large as America's and Europe's. By the way, is anybody aware that the European economy is already larger than the American economy has been for the last 10 years? Anybody aware of that? Exactly. So, what happens when Americans have been used to being the sole superpower in the world, basically since World War II, number one, for the last century, and now we're going to go into a new period that's supposed to span the entire next century, according to global economists, where now there will be 7 superpowers. Europe and America are only going to be 2 out of this set. The others are going to be Russia, China, India, Brazil, and a collection of Southeast Asian nations. What happens in that multipolar world? Let me make it even better. How many of you even heard of the concept of a multipolar world and the fact that you are all going into it today, right now? Anybody ever heard of that? Exactly. So, let's make it a little bit more complicated. 2003, America invades Iraq for the second time. And I am not condoning or criticizing. I'm simply saying is. At that time, America's global reputation was essentially destroyed. America became the most hated country in the world. Again, I'm not condoning or criticizing. I'm saying is. There's something called the Pew Global Survey. That's P-E-W, Global Survey. They have the Global Attitudes Project they've been tracing since the 1990s, I believe, and it shows that world opinion of America went like this right after Iraq. Now, here's the thing. It was supposed to get better under the new president, Barack Obama. He doesn't act like the previous president, George W. Bush. Here's the problem. The same Pew Global surveys show that the world opinion of America has not improved at all. In fact, in certain countries, George W. Bush is more liked than President Barack Obama. The interesting point is that we're going into a 15-year period where America has been the most hated country in the world. I'm not condoning, I'm not criticizing, I'm saying is. People have this perception, it's been there for a decade. Guess what? They're not going to change their opinions quickly or lightly. So now, I want to flip it back to you. Let's make a little example. I'm going to pick on you real quick. So, everybody knows Bob. And Bob used to be the only person that if you wanted 20 bucks, you had to go to Bob. But you know what? Bob wasn't really very nice. Bob was actually kind of mean and egotistical and kind of criticized you and belittled you every single time you asked for that $20. But you did it because, frankly, Bob was the only person to go to. Nobody likes Bob. Bob has acted this way for 10, 20 years. That's the way he is. But he's got money. Now what happens when there's 6 other people who can loan me $20? Do I go to Bob anymore? Does anybody go to Bob anymore? Nobody likes Bob. Only reason they went to Bob was because he had the money. Now there's 6 other banks. So would you go to somebody who belittles you and you never really liked when now you have 6 other stores to go and buy from? That's what's happening in the world right now. And here's how it plays out. There's this thing called the UN, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, something called the G20, or the World Trade Organization. These are bodies built up by America and Europe, principally 1945 after World War II, in order to keep everybody at one central negotiating table so we would have world peace. Largely it worked. Largely we were able to keep a peaceful globe for the last century, close to. But here's what's happening. China, Russia, India, Brazil, and ASEAN don't like the UN. They don't like the IMF. They don't like the World Bank. They don't like the G20 because they think they're nothing but puppets of America and Europe to hold on to American and European power. I'm not saying I agree. I'm not saying they're correct. I'm saying that's their opinion, and this is the way things are going. And as they have more money, they have more ability to act on their opinions. How many of you have ever heard of Mercosur? Exactly. So, Brazil has a trade organization they started around 95 called Mercosur. And they got all of Latin America to join into Mercosur. Now, originally when Mercosur started, they just started talking about trade. Now they're talking about social issues and health issues and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's exactly how the UN started. The UN started on a few specific issues, and then they added issues and added nations and added issues and added nations, and that's exactly how Mercosur is going with Brazil. Here's where it gets interesting. So, everybody heard of NAFTA? Yes, okay. America wanted to expand NAFTA south of Mexico to get all the rest of the Western Hemisphere into a trade bloc. It was going to be called the FTAA, or Free Trade Agreement of the Americas. Brazil told all of South America, you are not going to sign America's deal on the FTAA, or we're going to punish you in our UN called Mercosur. They got all of Latin American countries to vote down the FTAA and destroy it. America was going to expand NAFTA. They were blocked by this other superpower and their UN and kicked out. By the way, America's permanently banned from ever being part of Mercosur. Any of you ever heard that story? That's what I'm talking about, right there.